Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday morning, where we watch the Sunday morning news shows so that you do not have to. I'm Katie Halper.
I'm Aaron Maté. Good Monday morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Nice to start the week with you and some of the scummiest people on corporate TV as we're going to recap today. As always, our website is usefulidiotspodcast.com. Go there to support the show and get bonus content.
And make sure you watch our full extended interview with Claire Daly and Mick Wallace, because it's really fascinating and they're always great to hear from. And of course, our Thursday Throwdown, which is your midweek media madness dose. And so if you like this show, which we know you do, what is a better gift to yourself than more of it and midweek?
Exactly right. All right. Well, to get into today's show, again, we face the quandary where the Sunday morning news shows that we recap pretty much all but ignore the issue of our time, which is the ongoing genocide in Gaza. And some of the latest atrocities over the weekend were an Israeli strike on a group of children playing, literally in the process beheading children. That was the claim that was made on about October 7th, which was false, but it's been used to literally behead actual children in Gaza, which continues 18 months later today. Israel also attacked a group of journalists in a tent at a hospital, burning one of them, leaving him severely injured. And there have been many more such atrocities. And of course, you have the aftermath of Israel being caught lying about the fact that it executed 15 medical workers deliberately, despite knowing that they were medical workers and that they were in an ambulance with the lights flashing. And Israel was caught lying, and we know they're lying because the one of the slain victims recorded his death on his cell phone, which was found in his pocket after they were discovered in a mass grave that Israel buried, that Israel dug. So,
yeah.
and
they're I mean, it's disgusting. And we actually, there's audio of him, of this medical worker saying to his, well, we're going to get into it. Actually, I was going to quote him, but the clip that we're about to show does. And we're actually going to start with that clip, right? We're going to start with a Fox News clip, which shockingly covers this story, which again, should be breaking news. And, I guess this goes without say, but if we can just imagine for a second, if a bunch of Israeli medical workers were literally executed and buried along with their ambulances in a mass grave by Palestinians. It would probably take up the opening of every single Sunday morning show.
100%. And it would be on loop. It would be the top story in the world. It would be on loop. Because the genocide has become normalized, every day waking up to images of slain civilians is now become routine. The execution of 50 medical workers is just a part of what is now considered normal. But Fox News stood out as being one of the few networks that actually do a report on this. And so let's watch what they put on air.
Paramedics from the Palestine Red Crescent dig through the earth of southern Gaza. They're recovering the bodies of their colleagues killed by Israeli forces. On March 23rd, first responders were dispatched to this area of Rafah. When they arrived, Israeli soldiers opened fire.
Health workers should never be a target, and yet we're here today digging up a mass grave of first responders and paramedics.
On March 31st, the IDF provided a statement to Fox News saying, quote, several vehicles were identified advancing suspiciously toward IDF troops without headlights or emergency signals. Video released 5 days later by the Palestine Red Crescent directly contradicts that statement. The IDF also claimed in the initial findings that 9 out of the 15 medics were operatives in Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Asked multiple times for evidence to support that claim, none was provided. Funerals were held late last week for those killed by Israeli bullets. Families mourning the dead, mothers trying to make sense of the senseless. He went to save the martyrs and injured, and we've been waiting for him for a week. We were told that he was either martyred or injured.
Did we stop playing the clip? Isn't there more?
That they had killed them from the very first moment. They had killed them and buried them underground. As bodies of these medics rest inside white plastic bags with a photo attached, the face of Rifat Radwan stands out, the man who recorded his final moments with a final message. Forgive me, Mother. This is the path I chose, to help people, he said.
Can you just imagine? I mean, first of all, the utter tragedy and outrage of targeting these people and just imagining their final moments. And also this person asking for forgiveness from his mother. And his crime is that he dared help people or try to help people. And he did help people in the past, and he won't be able to do that anymore because he's been killed. And it's just so haunting to hear that audio. And, you know, it is kind of incredible that Fox News, Trey Yingst has been very good on this, and he's gotten a lot of pushback for this. But why is Fox News the only network talking about this?
Just to be clear on one thing, initially Trey Yingst was horrible. He took part in Israeli propaganda operations. He took part in the lies about Al-Shifa Hospital. Since then, maybe he's been humbled by the fact that he took part in pushing lies to support a genocide, and he has done some good stuff since. But just to be clear, he has not been good consistently. But look,
But I think
true.
It's evolved, maybe.
Sure. Well, it's true that he stands out now as actually doing some journalism as opposed to other people who are still lying. But amazingly, what would have happened if we had never gotten this audio from this assassinated medical worker who recorded his death? The Israeli lies would have been the norm. But because literally the lies were the lies are captured on video by the person who was assassinated by one of the people assassinated by Israel. Now they have no choice but to report this publicly. But of course, Israel is going to say still, yeah, these are members of Hamas, of course, with no evidence. And even if they were, how do you justify massacring relief workers? But of course, they're not. Everything's a lie. Israel just says everyone's Hamas. All these dead children, it's all Hamas's fault. All these dead medical workers, Hamas's fault. And the U.S. government accepts that, and that's ultimately what matters here, because that's who is footing the bill and providing the weaponry.
Right. And also another thing to mention is that, and major shout out to Asal Rod, who does wonderful media analysis coverage. A lot of the headlines that finally did acknowledge this video said that it appeared to contradict what Israel said. Appeared to contradict it.
Yeah.
And also have spouted the claim that there was a mistake, that this was a mistake. You know, sometimes you mistakenly assassinate, execute a bunch of people, bury them and their ambulances and lie about it mistakenly. We've all been there, right?
These people had no problem putting out story after story about fictional beheaded babies, mass rapes on October 7th. They had no problem putting that out there with no qualifications, just disingenuous language, falsely suggesting that these things occurred, which actually didn't. But now that we've documented evidence of Israel lying in massacring relief workers, they still have to water it down and say, oh, it appears that the Israeli account is not matched by the record, you know. So what can you say? Anyway, that's what's happening. That's what we're living through.
Yeah.
We're living through one of the worst crimes in human history. The Holocaust of our time. And
it is the Holocaust of our time. And, you know, this is one of the things that hopefully people will look back, and say, never again, what were we doing? And I say hopefully, because hopefully people will come to the realization that this is a Holocaust, as opposed to continue to deny it and dehumanize Palestinians. Of course, the ideal thing, and it's outrageous that it'll be in retrospect, because we need to recognize this now. But Aaron, just going back quickly to the Trey Yingst thing, it's not even about giving him credit so much as it is about shaming the other networks. Like, why is it on Fox News of all places? Why is this the one? Where's MSNBC on this? Where's CNN? It's And by the way, I'm not sure if they were journalists, but I do know that some of the people killed in the tent that journalists were in. Some of the people in that tent were killed. At least 2 people. So, yeah.
And one journalist is critically injured because he was burned. He was set afire by
Right.
the Israeli bombing, because it's Israel that's been burning people
Right.
while lying about atrocities that just didn't happen on October 7th.
Yeah, and it really does give. It's another example of every accusation is a confession, and it's also another example. And I'll just say this: like, I think this should be policy. Every single thing that Israel says should, by default, be not believed. Like, the default is that Israel's lying, and that's how every journalist should be reporting on it.
Okay, well, the top story among people who want to ignore that a genocide is going on is tariffs. Trump's tariffs, imposing pretty much tariffs on the entire planet. The stock market taking a huge tumble in the process. There's a lot of anxiety over it. The Trump administration's response is basically, just trust us. Trump's been a businessman for a long time. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
So just trust in Trump. But to kick us off on that, let's start with our recap from Meet the Depressed.
Good Sunday morning. The global fallout is intensifying after President Trump imposed the highest tariff levels against nearly every country in a century. Many economists are now warning President Trump's tariff plan could push the nation closer to a recession, while he insists it will bring the country to a new golden age.
It's our declaration of economic independence. For years, hardworking American citizens were forced to sit on the sidelines as other nations got rich and powerful, much of it at our expense. But now it's our turn to prosper.
The risks and uncertainty of this new trade war are causing serious jitters from Wall Street to Main Street, where American businesses and consumers are likely to bear the burden of higher costs. Stocks nosedived in the biggest losses since the COVID pandemic, wiping out a record $6 trillion in value in just 2 days. World leaders responding, suggesting the Trump tariffs will fundamentally change the global economic order.
The 80-year period when the United States embraced the mantle of global economic leadership, when it forged a...
By the way, he just said economic. Aaron, that you can confirm that that's just Canadian for economic, right?
Yes, I can confirm that. Yeah.
Alliances rooted in trust and mutual respect and championed the free and open exchange of goods and services is over.
The White House's message is to be patient and don't focus on the short-term impact.
The markets are going to boom, the stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom.
How long will it take to get manufacturing, American manufacturing, to where you would like to see it?
Well, let's say it's a 2-year process.
What I'd ask folks to appreciate here is that we are not going to fix things overnight.
On Saturday, protesters took to the streets in cities all across the country, speaking out against the Trump administration's moves to fire federal workers, immigration crackdowns, and new tariff policies. The White House has insisted the tariffs...
The protest was called Hands Off, right? Hands off the economy, hands off Medicaid, but they didn't say hands off Gaza. They excluded Gaza from the list of things that they want hands off of. So I guess they're saying, just as Joe Biden did, go crazy on Gaza. Do whatever you want. Keep slaughtering people. But they did say hands off NATO.
Right.
Look,
I feel better about that.
A lot of people rallied, and a lot of people rallied for important causes, like trying to protect Medicaid, and fair enough. It's just, from my point of view, it's unfortunate that the establishment Democratic narrative that says we have to protect NATO but not Gaza, that still prevails. I just think that's unfortunate.
Well, it's the real genocide is of NATO, Aaron.
Yeah, stop
Those are
NATO
the real
genocide.
victims. Yeah.
Well, meanwhile, by the way, the Trump administration, what they're actually doing is they're forcing NATO members, as we're going to talk about later in the show, to spend more money on the military. So don't worry if you're a panicked establishment Democrat worried about NATO. Don't worry. Your favorite military alliance is just getting everyone to spend more on the military industrial complex. So Trump administration is on your side.
So disgusting. Yeah. Really disgusting.
Are not a negotiating tactic, but President Trump contradicted that message, saying there is room for negotiation.
The president made it clear yesterday this is not a negotiation.
The tariffs give us great power to negotiate.
And just hours later, President Trump insisted, quote, "My policies will never change." Meanwhile, former Vice President Mike Pence is calling Trump's tariffs the largest peacetime tax hike in U.S. history and warns they could cost American families over $3,500 per year. And on Capitol Hill, there's growing concerns, even among some Republicans, about the president's actions.
Well, there could be short-term pain.
It's going to be consumers who bear the cost.
Tariffs are a terrible mistake. They don't work. They will lead to higher prices. Remember what Mama Gump said? Stupid is as stupid does. Let's don't be stupid. Let's don't have a trade war.
And joining me.
You know, it's interesting because even Donald Trump, when asked about the pain or when the outcome will be positive, when the tariffs will result in an American manufacturing boom, he says it'll be could take 2 years. So that's the optimistic assessment from the guy who's pushing these things forward, which is kind of fascinating. But I also love anytime John Kennedy speaks. So I'm not upset. I'm not angry about that because any policy that gives us gems from John Kennedy are good in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, he's quoting Forrest Gump. So yeah, that's so lovable. You know, Trump went from being like, on day one, the economy is going to be coming back, everything's going to be great. Now he's saying, yeah, we need 2 years. We need about 2 years for some serious pain, and then things will get better. Okay, yeah, it's a bit of a change from his campaign rhetoric. But look, in his defense, he did campaign on tariffs. That's not a complete shock.
Unlike Greenland, to be fair, yeah. And, you know, I do trust him, Aaron, because we know that he's a very demanding businessman. And I'm sure that if he were doing anything irresponsible, he would say to himself, you're fired.
100%.
100%. Also, I just want to add one thing because I didn't have the name at the time. So the journalist who was killed by Israel in the blaze in the tent that Israel set aflame was named Helmi al-Fakawi. So several injured, one journalist killed, and another man named Youssef Kazinder was killed. So they can add one more journalist to their incredible list of journalists killed.
All right. Well, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, he's been making the rounds to defend Trump's tariffs. And let's hear what he told Face the Nation.
9th, the so-called retaliatory tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs, I should say, are those coming or are they open to negotiation?
The tariffs are coming. He announced it and he wasn't kidding. The tariffs are coming. Of course they are.
Okay.
He really needs to get his team on more coordinated because he's being contradicted by his spokespeople, by his people in his administration. It's kind of getting a little bit awkward.
What are they saying that he's not?
Well, he says, like we just saw in the clip from Meet the Depressed, that he does say it's up for negotiation.
He's saying the tariffs are up for negotiation?
Yeah, he's saying both, that they're not and that they are.
Okay.
Yeah. He's covering all his bases.
Yeah. Apparently, there are people, who criticize him who say, but that he's someone who profits when the economy crashes. So he is one of the people who bets against things. That's called I forgot what the financial instrument. That
shorts. The big short.
Well, yeah, like you basically bet against the American people, and apparently that's the critique of him. I haven't verified that, but who knows what these people what they have their pockets in. But it's a confusing time. Well, Howard Lutnick does have a vision though for how manufacturing will be restored in the U.S. and what kind of jobs Americans will be getting to do under Trump's new tariff utopia.
Great American workers. We are going to replace
on other
the
networks,
armies of millions of people. Well, Remember, the army of millions and millions of human beings screwing in little screws to make iPhones, that kind of thing is going to come to America. It's going to be automated, and great Americans, the trade craft of America, is going to fix them, is going to work on them. They're going to be mechanics. There's going to be HVAC specialists. There's going to be electricians. The trade craft of America, our high school educated Americans, the core to our workforce is going to have the greatest resurgence of jobs in the history of America to work on these high-tech factories, which are all coming to America. That's what's going to build our next generation of America.
Are you?
So we're going to have a screwing army. That's exciting.
Mm-mm.
An army of screwers.
Like, that's the vision, an army of screwers, like people screwing in. I mean, look, there's something to be
Good
said
metaphor,
about how.
to be fair, the army does really screw things up.
Fair
Screw
enough.
the world. Yeah.
Yes. There is something to be said about the fact that it's, there is this unseen cost of all of our goods, like that we just like get our whatever our fancy phones and whatever, and we don't think about the people behind them. And it's true. iPhones are an example of, there's a lot of sweatshop labor and a lot of underpaid labor that goes into it. So in theory, there's something I think good about, not relying on an army of sweatshop labor overseas for the goods we have, right? Rather than taking it for granted. But if the vision is simply just importing low wage work back here, where there's an army of people screwing in little screws, I don't know. That's just not so inspiring.
Yeah. And again, the guy Lutnick just screams like used car salesman. He needs to shave. Sorry, I don't mean to be judgmental. I'm not being like, I think I can make this comment without it being problematic because I'm not talking about any inherent features of his. But I'm not sure if I'm impressed or not impressed by the fact that he is not afraid of not having a clean shaven face. Maybe that's important, but it definitely stands out. He's doing things, I guess it shows that he's a disruptor.
All right, well, let's hear more defenses of Trump's tariff policy from one of his biggest allies, Senator Markwayne Mullin of Oklahoma.
Of homoerotic.
President Trump has been talking about this since literally the 80s, way before he was even considering running for president. And so he understands what's going on. And when are we going to fix it? If we're not going to fix it now, Shannon, when are we going to have the backbone in this country to fix it? And now is the time to do it. And I trust President Trump and his leadership in doing so.
So you've been a consistent.
So Trump's been talking about this since the 80s. So therefore, we got to all fall in line. It's true. He has been talking about it since the 80s. He's also been saying a lot of crazy stuff since the 80s. Like, I don't know, in the 80s, he called for the execution of the exonerated five, aka the Central Park Five.
Right. He wanted to return the death penalty for that in particular. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so are we supposed to just embrace that policy too? Because Trump's been talking about it for a very long time.
Right. The
question is whether it's sound. And there are a lot of policies from the 80s that I think are very best left behind. Like, for example, the entire Reagan economic agenda of trickle-down economics, which Trump, to me, seems to be pursuing, where basically you cut taxes for the wealthy and hope someone will sprinkle down for the plebes below. I mean, that's been around since the 80s and hasn't worked out so well. So I don't share Markwayne Mullin's enthusiasm for the 80s. I am an 80s kid. That's where I grew up, but I don't share that kind of nostalgia for all the economic policies.
Yeah. And I also don't trust him to do anything that helps working people.
Okay, let's hear. Okay, more Trump defenders. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.
Markets lost more than $6 trillion in value. Was this disruption always part of the plan, Mr. Secretary?
Look, Chris, markets are organic, the animals, and you never know what the reaction's going to be. One thing that I can tell you as the Treasury Secretary, what I've been very impressed with is the market infrastructure that we.
I love the idea of calling the stock market organic, like, what organic animal is if it's like a free range,
right. Farm to
artisanal.
Table.
Sorry, I missed what you said, Katie.
Oh, farm to table.
Farm to table, exactly. Yes, farm to table, artisanal, creation. You know what I mean? Free range. Like that doesn't strike me as how the stock market works. To me, I just think of a bunch of people, going after each other and profiting at all costs and sacrificing workers if that's what it takes. It doesn't really scream organic to me.
It's really quite amazing. Yeah.
We had record volume on Friday, and everything is working very smoothly. So the American people, they can be very take great comfort in that. And in terms of the market reaction, look, we get these short-term.
We can take great comfort in the fact that the market's like it's open, it's working. I don't understand what he's saying. We can take comfort in. Like, how about people who are looking at their retirement funds, which some of which are tied to Wall Street, and seeing like $6 trillion wiped out in value? What's going to take comfort in there?
Yeah. I mean, the guy has a lot of confidence, and he seems very chipper.
Yeah, I mean, their message all comes down to basically just like, don't worry about it. Trump knows what he's doing.
All good, yeah.
He is the former host of The Apprentice, after all.
Right.
Market reactions from time to time. The market consistently underestimates Donald Trump. I remember that in 2016, the night President Trump won, the market crashed. And it turned out he was going to be the most pro-business president in over a century, maybe in the history of the country. And we went on to very high after inflation returns for the next 4 years.
Well, but this.
Okay, well, Trump's done it before. He was very pro-business. I mean, he did cut taxes for the ultra wealthy, and
right.
Some people were very happy with that. Again, I'm not hearing enough here to inspire a lot of confidence. Like, and especially meanwhile, they're going after social services. They have Medicaid, Social Security, Medicare in their crosshairs. They're firing a bunch of federal workers. It just, I'm not seeing where the relief comes in for the average person.
And also, it's worth noting that according to the AP and other sources, that according to statistics from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, Trump's GDP growth actually averaged, when he was president the first time, averaged 2.67%. And 1.45% with the pandemic included, 2.67% without pandemic, and that is compared to Biden's 3.1%. So the facts just don't align.
All right. Well, we're going to keep it going with more Trump administration officials who are out there doing the Lord's work, defending the guy who currently is presiding over a major crash in the stock market, and it's a little hard to defend, but they're doing their best. Let's Agricultural Secretary Brooke Rollins spoke to Jake Tapper.
People are questioning the level of scholarship here behind how these tariffs were done. For example, President Trump laid out with a giant graphic of all the countries where tariffs were going to be, what he called reciprocal tariffs, were going to be imposed. And you're imposing a 10% tariff on the herd in McDonald Islands. The herd in McDonald Islands have 0 human inhabitants. They have 0 exports. They have 0 imports. They do have a lot of penguins. Why are you putting import tariffs on islands that are entirely populated by penguins?
Well, I mean, come on, Jake. Obviously, here's the bottom line. We live under a tariff regime from other countries. We have too long
the McDonald Islands is not imposing
the idea that America goes first. I mean, come on. Whatever. Listen.
Okay, sorry. She sounds like such a teenager, like whatever. She's rolling her eyes. She so clearly has no response to this. So she's just doing, come on, Jake. I mean, whatever. She's like stalling a lot, using a lot of filler words. It's pretty great. But I'm glad we're finally going after those freeloading penguins.
I think the official defense from the Trump team is that this island is used by China for exports or something. I don't know. But certainly she's not been she's not among those who have been given those talking points.
Right, exactly.
So
She's not making an effective argument.
Yeah.
The people that are leading this are serious, intentional, patriotic, the smartest people I've ever worked with. I did not come up with the formulas. I'm the ag secretary. I studied agriculture at Texas A&M. I was in a lot of conversations to make sure our farmers and our ranchers were part of that. The president recognized the importance of inputs. We got potash and fertilizer to make sure they could do their planting. But I have no doubt that I speak on behalf of President Trump when he would say he has the utmost confidence in the team and what they have built and what they have put together. And we are unleashing a new golden age, and we will see an economy that will benefit not just every corner of America, but our farmers and our ranchers and the people that have been left behind for far too long by both Republicans and Democrats.
So I like the way, she does have talking points here. They just don't correspond at all. They just don't correspond at all to the question asked. So she deserves partial credit.
Well, again, the message is trust. These are great people. They're intentional, she says. They're intentional.
I know. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do love some wellness talk, some sort of like spiritual adjacent, positive thinking. So they're intentional. Yeah. Okay. So it's like
they're manifesting a good economy.
They're manifesting. Exactly. They're manifesting. Okay. So everyone just relax. Yeah. Everyone relax. Okay. Well, there's some dissension in the ranks. Because not everybody is on board with the tariffs, including apparently Elon Musk, who does have deep financial interests in China. And so he doesn't appear to be very thrilled about all these tariffs going up on Chinese goods. But Peter Navarro, who is, what's his position? I think he's he's a top advisor to Trump. He had things to say about Elon Musk.
To Elon Musk for a second, because I'm glad that you brought that up. He also took a shot at you personally on X, and he's going against the administration with respect to the tariff policy. The president has said in the coming months he may leave the administration. Peter, is there a rift internally?
No, I mean, Elon, when he's in his Doge lane is great, but we understand what's going on here. We just have to understand. Elon sells cars. And he's in Texas assembling cars that have big parts of that car from Mexico, China. The batteries come from Japan or China. The electronics come from Taiwan. And he's simply protecting his own interests, as any business person would do. We're more concerned about Detroit building Cadillacs with American engines. And that's what this is all about. So it's fine. There's no riff here. Look, Elon.
He's saying there's no riff here after. Sorry, go on, Aaron.
Well, it sounds like there's a riff to me.
Exactly. I would say so. Yeah. Operation Rift. Yeah. And he's currently, by the way, the senior counselor for trade and manufacturing for Trump. But yeah, that's kind of awkward. I wonder if there's going to be like a fight behind the scenes now between Elon and Pete.
It's good to see him admit that Elon Musk has like a conflict of interest.
Exactly.
And being inside the government while having all these financial ties. And, look, maybe that's our hope for the world, everybody, is that different Trump administration officials who have different agendas in terms of their own financial interests will fight. And that will put a stop to whatever extent Trump is like wrecking the world. That will put a curb on it, because there'll be too much infighting over who gets to profit over what,
Right.
But
we did see a bit of a civil war, the stirrings of a civil war between Bannon and Musk, and really harsh words from Bannon.
That's right. Steve Bannon has called out Elon Musk, and but Steve Bannon, I imagine, is on board with these tariffs.
Yeah, right. And what they do have in common, though, they fight, but at the end of the day, they're united by their love of Nazi salutes. So maybe that's why we haven't heard so much from Bannon, because they're on team Sieg Heil. Or maybe they're both autistic, since that was an excuse given for Elon. And by the way, guys, I would like to think I don't need to do this, but I'm sorry. I have to call people not out, but in. Less than half of you have liked the stream. 788 of you have liked the stream, We have over 2,000 people watching, 796. We really don't want to take time away from this wonderful coverage. So I'm going to need you guys to step it up. We'll get back to it during the next clip, but I may do a walk-off, guys. I may have to do a walk-off.
Yeah, that'd be very dramatic. It'd be very, very dramatic.
Well, desperate times call for desperate measures. So
wow, yeah,
there you go. Yeah, we're almost at 1,000. Let's get it up there. Okay.
Okay. Well, that was a lot of tariff talk. Let's switch gears and TT and talk about NATO. What's happening with that whole Ukraine proxy war thing that Trump promised to end? The Trump administration has talked a big game. They've talked about making peace with Russia. They blame Biden. But are they really doing anything to stop the war? And the problem from Russia's perspective is that, like, Russia fought this war for many reasons. You know, there was a coup in 2014 backed by the U.S., and that set off an assault on the Russian-aligned areas of Ukraine in the Donbass. So they want something to address that, the rights of ethnic Russians in the Donbass. They also want NATO to stop expanding, including to Ukraine, which the Trump administration has said they're on board with. But they also want NATO to stop putting, you know, military infrastructure close to Russia's borders in a way that threatens Russia. And, you know, Trump, who campaigned on and, you know, brags about how he's getting NATO to spend more money on the military industrial complex, it doesn't seem like he wants to do that. So there's been kind of a lull in these negotiations, and it doesn't appear clear if they're going anywhere. So here for an update is NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who's basically a glorified weapons salesman. His job, he doesn't really do anything except go around the world and basically ask NATO members to spend more on the military industrial complex. And here are his thoughts on the negotiations to end the war in Ukraine.
At the same time that President Trump is calling for a peace deal in Ukraine, there is this parallel, separate effort to repair America's relationship with Russia. Doesn't the U.S. getting closer to Russia undercut your efforts to counter Russia?
Of course, I'm not.
Does it look upset? See, Margaret Brennan, who's relatively fair-minded on Gaza, right? Like, you know, when it comes to Gaza, she's not as bad as everybody, as most of the people on corporate TV. But on Russia, anytime there's any talk of peace, she's always like, doesn't, as is the case here, doesn't talk about peace undermine our ability to go to war with Russia.
Exactly.
Like, you know, how are we going to make peace with Russia if really we just want war, which is what people like her want? It's a hard concept for them to grasp, but maybe it's actually not a bad thing to have peace with another top nuclear power and to end a war that's killed so many people.
Well, Aaron, she was the anchor who inspired your comparison between talk on sanctions and little kids on a long car ride. Like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Do we have sanctions yet? Do we have sanctions yet? So, yeah.
She really wanted those sanctions. And what are the sanctions done? I mean, Russia's economy has not collapsed, as Joe Biden fantasized about it doing. And so, like, what are we doing here? You know, what are we doing here? I mean, it's really hard in Washington to get around the idea that just maybe negotiations, diplomacy is just not a bad thing.
Right.
You know, but anyway, let's hear from Mark Rutte.
In the room when all these talks take place. But what I'm seeing from a distance and hearing from my American colleagues, and all, including the president, whom I visited a couple of weeks ago in a very successful meeting we had in the Oval Office, and then during lunch, there is this effort to bring this war to an end. The ball clearly is in the court of the Russians. They are not moving fast enough, is my impression, including the impression I'm getting from my American interlocutors, that Russia really has to do more to bring this war to an end. The Ukrainians are reeling close to the American position. And we have to see how far the Americans can get this. But I am completely supporting that effort, because this war of protection, it was unsustainable in the long term. So many people dying, so much of the Ukrainian infrastructure being damaged, cities being destroyed. This got to end.
Okay, so now you admit it. So now, after 3 years of war, hundreds of thousands of dead. Now you're saying this war is not sustainable. This can't last. Well, so why did you fuel it to begin with? Now, granted, Mark Rutte was not the head of NATO for most of the last 3 years. He only recently took over from Jens Stoltenberg. But the message from Jens Stoltenberg and from Mark Rutte before he took over the job and Trump sort of talked about diplomacy was, we have to keep the war going. We can't lose to Russia. Ukraine can win. I mean, that's all they've been telling us. Ukraine can win. Now he's saying, yeah, after hundreds of thousands of dead, it's not really quite sustainable anymore.
Yeah, who could have seen that coming, right?
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if they regret, NATO members, the United States and Britain, if they regret getting in the way of those peace negotiations, right, that we talk about a lot, interfering to prevent a peace deal in 2022 at the Istanbul negotiations.
Well, they don't regret that because, first of all, no journalist ever asked them about it. It's like there's like an omerta, like an oath of silence in corporate media, where you just cannot talk about the fact that in the spring of 2020, literally 3 years ago, right now, today, there was peace talks still ongoing in Istanbul, but the US and UK put a stop to that and said, we're not going to back you up, Ukraine, if you sign this, and keep fighting Russia. And if you do, we'll give you lots of weapons. And that's exactly what happened. And now here we are. Okay, more Mark Rutte. So we just heard Margaret Brennan being concerned that peace talks undermine our ability to have war with Russia, right? Fair enough. There's also the concern that the U.S. might pull troops from Europe, which would just be such a terrible thing. Because, of course, the first thing we need in this world is more U.S. troops stationed abroad, in the eyes of our corporate media. So here are some thoughts on that from Mark Rutte.
There are roughly about 90,000 or more U.S. troops stationed in Europe right now. Secretary Hegseth said Europe should not assume that presence is going to last forever. I know you say that the U.S. is committed to NATO, but do you have any sense of how fast or significant this kind of drawdown that's being mentioned by Hegseth could be? And is there a NATO backup plan?
There are no concrete plans for the drawdown. What we know, and Pete Hegseth was very clear on this, is that this U.S. administration, but by the way, this is U.S. policy since 2010, to pivot more towards Asia, towards the Indo-Pacific. And the agreement we have is that we will do whatever is necessary in a no surprises way. I completely acknowledge the fact that the United States has more theaters to attend to, not only the Euro-Atlantic, but also the Indo-Pacific. And by the way,
the U.S. has more theaters to attend to. It's if like they have tickets to multiple show performances. Hello, yes, we are seeing the performance today of U.S. troops invading China. So let's go to that performance. We have to go to that theater. It's just this idea that like we have the right to have troops all around the world, and that's totally fine. And it's a scary thing if maybe we're considering pulling some from Europe. But don't worry. If we do pull them from Europe, it'll be for a good cause. It'll be the pivot to Asia, aka war with China.
Right. Well, something, by the way, that Rutte and Trump have in common, and this may be why he's so excited about what's happening now, is there's Teflon Don, and he's called Teflon Mark.
Really?
Because he's called Teflon Mark. And he also, talk about Teflon, he was the prime minister of the Netherlands from 2010 to 2024.
Wow, that's a long run.
That's a lot of Teflon, yeah.
Okay, well, listen, we've heard some alarm about the possibility of U.S. troops pulling out of Europe and the possibility of peace in Ukraine. So Mark Rutte, the head of NATO, has some reassuring words for anyone who's concerned about the state of the military-industrial complex. Could peace in Ukraine possibly impact the bottom line of war profiteers? And Mark Rutte has something to say to reassure everyone who's worried about less profits for war profiteers.
Summit is now going to be held in June, and leaders there are expected to hike the military budget spending goal from 2% to 3%. The Trump administration wants it all the way up to spending about 5% on a country's own defense. How do you convince members to spend more to counter the threat from Russia at a time when the U.S. is going closer to it and the U.S. is putting economic pressure on Europe?
What?
How do you convince NATO members to spend more money on the military-industrial complex, and what can I do to help?
Right.
Can I be involved in strategy meetings? Is there a group is there a group text? You know what I mean?
Signal.
Let's get a Google Doc
chat.
going. Signal, yeah. I want to be involved. What can we do? Let's get it up to 5% of GDP because we're not giving enough money to Lockheed Martin. That's the question that I'm hearing there.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm not sure they need that much convincing, too much persuasion, to quote Margaret. Poland has already declared they'll increase their spending close to 5%. Germany recently voted to rearm, which is pretty significant, and their defense spending is set to increase as a result. The EU voted to increase defense spending to, amongst other things, quote, support member states, end quote, to support member states' public funding in defense and increase defense investments. And France is looking to grow their military to more than 3% of their GDP. So I think they're already persuaded.
It's really amazing how just easily people get enrolled in this collective self-destruction. Like Europe is a good example. Like, they just sat back and watched as somebody, we don't know who specifically, blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, which cut off a major source of energy to a lot of Europe coming from Russia. And, the suspicion is that the U.S. did it. That's what I believe. But regardless, this was done in the interest of the Ukraine proxy war. And everyone just kind of was like, okay, yeah, sure, let's cut off our major source of energy and I'll have a harder time staying warm this winter. That's fine. And then now let's further cut our social services, as there's talk across Europe of doing, to spend more on our military to confront this massively inflated threat of Russia. And there's, if you still challenge that today after 3 years of proxy war, you're called a Russian apologist and all those things. But it's absolute disaster. But yet we've been so successfully duped into going along with it across the NATO alliance. And we even have journalists sort of lobbying for it openly on TV. But again, Mark Rutte is going to reassure people who are concerned that military spending is going down, that he's going to lay out what you just did, Katie, that don't worry, we're spending a lot of money on weapons.
Trump has done since he came into office is break the deadlock when it comes to this terrible war in Ukraine, because we've got to stop the killing. We've got to stop the fighting. And I commend him for that. And then when it comes to defense spending, the last couple of months, here in the European side of NATO, it is staggering the amounts of billions coming in. But we have to continue doing this because, as I said in December, if we would stick to the old 2%, we cannot defend ourselves here in 3 to 5 years.
So great news, everyone. Trump is pressuring everyone to spend more money on the military. So don't worry. That's the message from Mark Rutte. Right.
So Margaret can now breathe easy and sleep easy. Yeah. I wonder if she was tossing and turning before this interview, before she knew the answers. Yeah.
Okay.
You know what I like about Rutte? Very intentional.
Very intentional. Very, very intentional. Yes, very, very intentional. And of course, he has to pay lip service to now, like Trump talking about ending the war and say what a wonderful thing that is to end the war. But again, NATO has been at the forefront of lobbying for the war for a very, very long time. I mean, his predecessor, Jens Stoltenberg, his famous line was, weapons are the way to peace. So if we want peace in Ukraine, send more weapons. Weapons are the way to peace.
He also pointed out that it was great for the American economy.
That's right. Oh, of course. They love that one. They love that one. Okay. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General.
The best.
She went on Fox News Sunday to talk about Luigi Mangione. He is the suspect in the assassination of that United Healthcare CEO, and the government seeking the death penalty against Luigi Mangione. So here is Pam Bondi on that.
Some other cases, the death penalty this week, you announced that you want the prosecution to seek that with Luigi Mangione, accused of gunning down United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in Midtown Manhattan. Politico reacted to that with this line, how Trump loses Gen Z. I was in an airport a couple of weeks ago with a young woman that had on a sweatshirt with his face on it, and he was portrayed as a religious icon. There was a halo, kind of like a saint. What's your take on how the younger generation sees him as a bit of a folk hero, and Politico's assessment that it may cost you politically?
Shannon, the president's directive was very clear. We are to seek the death penalty when possible. And, it hadn't been done in 4 years. I was a capital prosecutor. I tried death penalty cases throughout my career. If there was ever a death case, this is one. This guy is charged with hunting down a CEO, a father of two, a married man, hunting him down and executing him. Yeah, I feel like these young people have lost their way. I was receiving death threats for seeking the death penalty on someone who is charged with an execution of a CEO. We're going to continue to do the right thing. We're not going to be deterred by political motives. I've seen a protester walking down the street here, free Luigi. I mean, this guy's charged with a violent crime, and we're going to seek the death penalty whenever possible.
Okay, another headline.
That's so great. I'm so reassured. I mean, Luigi aside, I really want a president who seeks the death penalty whenever possible. I like when the default is death penalty. Because what's wrong with the death penalty? I mean, it's not like innocent people are executed. It's not like it's an extremely unjust application, racist, classist. Although to be fair for Pam and Trump, that's probably just one of the upsides of the death penalty. But also note how she kind of simultaneously doesn't answer the question, but also proves her point. All she's saying is how popular Luigi Mangione is, because the question is whether this is going to hurt supporters, especially young supporters. And her answer kind of implies that it will be, but she's sticking to it because she's so pro death penalty.
One of the lessons to living an intentional life, according to all spiritual teachings, is to seek the death penalty when possible.
Right, exactly.
Be intentional about the death penalty. We heard earlier about how intentional the Trump administration is. So they're intentional about the death penalty, and they're going with it. So
gross. Yeah. Yeah, it's and by the way, it is important to say, she says, if there was ever a death penalty case, this is the one. Okay, well, he's like a superstar. It's a bipartisan thing, by the way. I don't mean about among politicians. I mean, among the people. It is incredible that one of the few things that unites people at different ends of the spectrum is their support of Luigi Mangione. And how many people have been killed by the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson? And another thing I just wanted to point out is that, these people who care so much about the sanctity of life, people may remember that Trump pardoned the Blackwater killers who murdered 31 innocent people in Iraq. But yet they say that Luigi is the criminal who needs to be killed. If only he had shot and killed a bunch of innocent Iraqis, he'd probably be hailed as a hero by the Trump administration.
Okay, more Pam Bondi talking about that whole deportation of alleged Venezuelan gang members. It turns out CBS News, 60 Minutes, just did an investigation where they actually found that 75% of those deported, accused of being Venezuelan gang members, 75% didn't even have criminal records. And of course, one of them is a gay hairdresser who has no gang ties whatsoever. He was deported simply because of his tattoos, which were attributed to his mom and dad. And based on those tattoos, they just assessed that he's a gang member. And the Trump administration, though, is not backing down. So here is Pam Bondi on that. And in this case, I believe she's going to be speaking about a father in Maryland who was also deported, again, with zero evidence that he's a part of the gang MS-13.
Well, you know how you seek the death penalty whenever you can. You also seek deporting and locking people up in basically slave labor prisons whenever you can. You want to err on the side of intentionality.
Got to be intentional. Got to be intentional.
Judge said, that's just chatter in my view. I haven't been given any evidence in a court of law when someone is accused of membership in such a violent and predatory organization. It comes in the form of an indictment, a complaint, a criminal proceeding that has robust process so we can assess the facts. So would it be helpful in making your case, not only to the court, but in the court of public opinion, to show what you have explaining these allegations against him?
Yeah, and to explain to you, ICE has testified, members of ICE, that he is an MS-13 gang member. And The defense, his lawyers, have argued, well, he should be here because he was studying to be an electrician. Well, let me give you a comparison. I was just in our home state of Florida this week where we arrested 3 MS-13 gang members. These 3 it was a cold case, 10 years old. They are charged with violently stabbing an individual over 100 times as part of their gang initiation. 1 was arrested in Fort Lauderdale. 1 was arrested. He fled to Minnesota. Great police work, FBI, all of the agencies together. Border Patrol even caught him. 1 there. And then the other, ready for this, was a drywall hanger in the Villages in Florida. Hanging drywall. So the argument that because these people are living among us, these illegal aliens from El Salvador, means they're not part of a gang, that's how they're...
No, that's not the argument. The argument is, if you're going to accuse them of being in a gang, you have to show evidence.
Right.
And in the case of this man from Maryland, his father, there was none shown so far, as there was none shown about this hairdresser who was also deported. That's the point. That's the argument. If you're going to accuse someone of something, show evidence for it. That's the basis for like the judicial system.
Right. And it's interesting, by the way, that they have no argument when their response is to talk about how brutal the alleged crimes are, right? Because that doesn't answer the question of evidence and due process. It's just pure, it's like atrocity propaganda. So they kind of bypass people's brains and just go to the visceral response. And it has nothing to do with the question asked. Like, you don't get to deprive people of due process based on how bad their crime is.
Their alleged crime is.
Alleged crime. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And it's important to point out that 60 Minutes found that 75% of the Venezuelans deported to El Salvador have no criminal records. And a judge ruled that a man, Abrego Garcia, who had been investigated before for gang involvement, would have a stay on his deportation in 2019, and he could remain in the U.S. And Trump's ICE deported him anyways, and now says lacks jurisdiction because Abrego Garcia is not in the United States custody. So they're defying court orders to carry through with these illegal deportations. But look, hey, you got a terrible alleged crime, and you got ICE testifying. So I guess we're supposed to sleep well at night.
Okay, well, to close out the show, let's turn to a Useful Idiots fan favorite. We haven't heard from him in a while, and he sure makes my blood boil, this guy. But it's always a good, funny time to hear him. His name is Adam Schiff. He's the guy who decided that around this time in Trump's first term, with all the things Trump was doing, let's focus on a conspiracy theory that Trump is a Russian asset. Let's make that the top issue of Trump's presidency. And we all know how that went, but he's still around. He's actually now a senator from California. He's received a job upgrade. But Adam Schiff, after deciding there was a good idea to make a dumb Russia conspiracy the top issue of Trump's first presidency, he has thoughts on where the Democrats have gone wrong and what they can do better. So let's hear what Adam Schiff has to say.
To be arresting that now.
I do want to ask you about the Democratic Party. There's a new book out by Chris Whipple, who reports that in the days before President Biden's devastating debate performance with President Trump, his first chief of staff, Ron Klain, returned to help him prep. Klain reports that he was surprised by the fact that he thought that President Biden was struggling to focus. He said he seemed confused about President Trump's policies and even fell asleep by the pool after cutting one debate prep session short.
Look, sleep is important. You got to have good sleep hygiene. So maybe he was being intentional about his self-care, and he just needed to take a nap by the pool. To be fair, I mean, it's funny that that Klain said that he didn't understand Trump's policies. To be fair, a lot of people don't understand them because they're pretty inconsistent. And also, to be fair, that's a good equal but opposite reaction, because remember, Trump famously said during the debate, "I don't know what he said, and neither does he." Which was actually probably the most honest thing he said during the debate, along with the admission, but for him it wasn't bad, so it wasn't even admission, along with the statement that it wasn't Hamas that wanted to keep fighting, but Israel, and they should finish the job. Back to Shifty.
Do you think that former President Biden's advisors misled the American people about his capacities?
It's hard for me to gauge what the closest advisors of the president were seeing at the time. I can only speak to the interactions that I had with him.
It's hard for me to gauge the fact that the president did no interviews and was totally out of it and had to drop out because he was in cognitive decline, and what his closest aides knew or didn't. I mean, come on. Come on,
Yeah.
Shifty Schiff. Just,
Yeah.
They're gone now. They're out of power. It's okay to but anyway. This is
you can
this is
stop
water under
lying.
the bridge.
Yeah.
Which were, in the months leading up to his getting out of the race, largely ceremonial occasions. But I will say this. He made the decision to get out of the race. I think that was the right decision. The vice president, as the vice president, I think ran a great campaign, but could not run away from being a representative of the status quo. And the fact is that people are hurting and have been hurting for a long time. This is a, frankly, decades in the making problem where people are working harder than ever and still can't get by. What Donald Trump is doing right now is making that so much worse. But we have to address it. Both parties are going to need to address this. Right now, this budget that you're talking about is going to give a massive tax cut for billionaires, and they're going to take it out of middle-class families, and they're going to explode the deficit and debt. That's just going to move us further in the wrong direction. So we're going to have to grapple with some of the central challenges, structural challenges in our economy. I think the failure of Democrats to do that in the past resulted in our losing the White House. The catastrophic damage they're doing to the economy now is going to cause Trump and Republicans to lose Congress. But both parties are going to have to tackle this global challenge to our economy.
And that takes me.
Listen, things are bad for Democrats if even Adam Schiff has to admit that, look, maybe we should start talking about real issues, actually, and not obsessing about Russia every single day for 24
Which used to be my lane. Right.
Yeah, it used to be my lane, I'm sorry, I just feel a little bit of personal frustration here because this is what I was saying back during the Russiagate era. I was saying to people like Adam Schiff, you got to focus on real issues. This Russia conspiracy thing is not going to work out for you very well. First of all, people didn't care about it. I went to one rally once, in New York to save the Mueller investigation. It was so sad. There was 50 people there, and because of course no one cared. It was so stupid and so divorced from real life because it was all fantasy. So it's good to see Adam Schiff admit this now, although of course he's not going to take accountability for elevating an obsession with Russia and pushing the Ukraine proxy war and all those other democratic disasters. But at least there's some acknowledgement now that there has to be a focus on real issues. And to the credit of the Blue Anon cult, you watch MSNBC now, and they are talking a lot more about real issues. They are.
Yeah,
it's
all it took was Trump winning the election.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, after they handed it to him. By also keeping Biden in the race for a lot longer and also not having a primary and therefore anointing Kamala Harris without any competition.
And also, please notice how he doesn't answer the question about Biden, and nor does he answer when he's doing a kind of mini post-mortem about why the Democrats lost. He doesn't mention Gaza because, of course, he's a big major cheerleader for the genocide. But we know from polls that was a major issue for voters who stayed home.
Yeah. And has Adam Schiff learned any lessons there? No. I mean, again, just last week, he was among the senators to vote against Bernie Sanders' resolution that would block some weapons transfers to Israel. Only, I think, 15 senators voted for Bernie's measure. 15, all Democrats, by the way.
Yeah, only 15, yeah.
Rand Paul, who's supposed to be the anti-war Republican.
Yeah, America Firster.
Yeah, he voted against Bernie's measure. And credit to those who did. Credit to Bernie Sanders for bringing that up to a vote. And Adam Schiff was not among the senators to join him. In defiance not only of basic morality, but also a majority of Democratic Party voters.
Right, exactly. So bad policy, morally speaking and ethically speaking, and bad policy, politically speaking. But, it does prove that we often ask the question, who's watching Useful Idiots and who's not? And now we know that he is watching Useful Idiots because he's finally listening to you, Aaron, which makes him, I believe, not just a Putin puppet, but a Maté puppet, a Maté marionette.
Well, I welcome him to the fold.
Yeah.
I welcome Adam Schiff to the fold.
Yeah.
Everyone's welcome here.
And this has been a great Monday morning. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we will see you next week. Oh, can I make an announcement about the Katie Halper show this week?
Yeah.
So tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at youtube.com/The Katie Halper Show, I will be interviewing, talking to Norman Finkelstein, and we're going to break down Chuck Schumer's amazing book, Anti-Semitism in America, a Warning.
Here's a preview of Norman's comments. My innards writhe when I read Chuck Schumer's prose.
Right. Prose.
This terrible prose. My innards writhe when
and Norman's probably watching, so I hope he appreciates this. Because I know he does watch Monday morning.
I'm sure Norman has some wonderful things to say, but I can't wait to hear what he has to say. I'm sure. Norman, of course, actually is a serious scholar, very, very serious. So which means he read the whole book by Chuck Schumer, and I just can only imagine how painful that must have been to get through that. Because
I did it too. I did a combo of audio and reading.
This is Chuck Schumer writing a whole book about anti-Semitism, and of course defending Israel's mass murder in Gaza and basically smearing people who oppose that as anti-Semites.
Right.
And he has a career, decades of experience doing that. So I'm sure this was a terrible ordeal, and I look forward to hearing Norman and you discuss it. And I'll plug something. I'm going to guest host the Jimmy Dore show tonight. That's Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're around, come join us.
Tune in. Also, Norman has special insight as a someone who went to the same school as Chuck Schumer.
That's right. The same high school. That's right.
Yeah.
And Chuck Schumer's sister.
Right.
Yeah.
Who was very smart, according to Norman.
Very, very smart. Very smart.
7 p.m. People are asking what time. 7 p.m. EST. Yeah.
Okay. Our website is usefulidiots.podcast.com. Please go there to support the show and keep us going. Thanks so much for watching Monday morning. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.